1814 AD, 5708 AM. During the British bombardment of Fort McHenry, Francis Scott Key wrote the famous Star-Spangled Banner. The conclusion of this war demonstrated that the Americans were rapidly becoming the equals of any power in Europe, 120 being a major foundational number in calendrics. This was exactly 120 years after the Bank of England started in 1694 AD, 120 being a major foundational number in calendrics. The Bank of England was owned by the Rothschild banking dynasty, and the War of 1812 was a demonstration to the American government how easy it was that they could influence entire nations to war. Interestingly, this year was 148 years, 1776 months, after the Great Fire of London in 1666. Also in 1814, Pope Pius VII restored the order of the Jesuits officially, though many believe the Jesuits only went underground and were never truly abolished. This was 1260 years after the imperial restoration of the Roman Empire by Justinian in 554 AD, one, A Patriot's History of the United States. 1815 AD, 5709 AM. Napoleon's forces were opposed by the British, the Prussians and Belgians in the famous Battle of Waterloo. During this episode of European history, Amschel Rothschild is praised in international Jewry today for his brilliant defrauding of the English people. Knowing that the stock market would crash if Napoleon won, and that it would soar if the British won, Rothschild had agents on the continent and the English Channel, using carrier pigeons and signal ships. Though Rothschild received the message that the French lost and Napoleon was defeated, he deliberately sent out agents throughout London to spread the news that Napoleon was victorious and that England had lost the Battle of Waterloo. The result was predicted. The stock market plummeted and Mayor Amschel Rothschild, through his agents, bought up whole companies for pennies on the dollar in an unparalleled buying frenzy that left the English people bankrupt, whole families with centuries-old companies destitute. The next day the truth was known, that Napoleon was defeated and captured by the British, but it was too late for England. Rothschild stole the wealth of England. Napoleon is exiled to the island of Elba, where he escaped the same year and began his second conquest of France. In Mammoth Cave, Kentucky, were discovered labyrinthine tunnels, wherein were found a mummified human female, with finely chiselled features showing her to be young. She was fossilised. Due to continued pirate attacks on US ships in the Mediterranean, Congress declared war on Algiers and the Barbary States. A US naval fleet was sent to Algiers, Tunis and Tripoli, and peace was obtained for US merchants. 1. Jewish supremacism. 2. Secret cities of old South America. 1816 AD, 5710 AM. In the 40th year since the Declaration of Independence, the Second Bank of the United States is approved by Congress, this also owned by the Rothschilds. Many Americans are enraged by this treachery. An Anglo-Dutch fleet bombarded Algiers in retaliation for piracy. A huge spectacle was seen passing through the sky that apparently missed the earth. In April, Mount Tambora in Java, Indonesia, erupted with earthquakes, initially killing 12,000 people, the detonations being heard 1,000 miles away. Subsequent disease and starvation shortly afterward killed more people, an estimated 80,000. So much ash was thrust into the atmosphere that a dust veil darkened the sun in a thick haze, so severely that 1816 was known as the year without a summer. On September 23rd, New England suffered strange gale-force winds that wrought much devastation. Giovanni Battista Caviglia, born 1770, spent 4 years studying the Great Pyramids and Sphinx. He was a hermeticist and student of the occult, who tunnelled into the recesses above the king's chamber in search of a hidden chamber in the area the shaft from the queen's chamber ascended. How he was aware of this is not known, but later a chamber would indeed be found. 1. Synagogue of Satan. 2. Book of the Damned. 1819 AD, 5713 AM. About 2,000 square miles of dry land in India sank below the sea abruptly. The ancient 200-ton monolith known as Cleopatra's Needle, an obelisk from the Egyptian city of Memphis, crafted in 1515 BC, was given to the British by Muhammad Ali. It would be another 59 years before being relocated to London. When Thutmose III had this and another obelisk erected in 1515 BC, both Manasseh and Ephraim were still alive in Egypt, and Egypt was full of labouring Israelites. The pedigree of the peoples of the British Isles and the United States, and by extension most of Europe, would soon be demonstrated as the very obelisks their ancestors erected in Egypt, over 33 centuries earlier, would be placed in the major centres of power, belonging to the last days descendants of the Israelites, London and New York. In this year, Arthur Schopenhauer wrote in his The World and Representation, quote, "Thus animals existed before men, fish before the land animals, plants before fishes, and the inorganic before the organic. Consequently, the original mass had to go through a long series of changes before the first eye could be opened," unquote. The myth that Charles Darwin was first to believe in biological evolution is clearly dissolved here. 1. The antediluvian world. 2. Today, tomorrow, and the great beyond. 3. The world as will and representation.